Computer. So welcome everyone to the Light on the Horizon webinar, which is now happening on the last Friday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And this is a free global webinar that's offered to anyone in the world, in the entire world. Oh, we only have 4 today, but it might be 4 billion soon. As the climate crisis proceeds, and our goal here is to support people who are really looking at what's happening with our world ecologically, climate-wise, and politically, in the sense of that dictates how and where solutions might be applied to the crisis and how we respond to the crisis. So it's sort of a place to marry a spiritual wisdom with any kind of actions or non-actions that we feel inclined to do or not do. So, for example, some people in light of this crisis might simply want to live as presently as they can and be of assistance in their personal lives to others in a very simple way. I happen to be an activist, but it's all good, because what we're really trusting here is the power of mind, which is the energy and intelligence of all life, to operate through us as we get clarity, both looking at the nature of the crisis and going deeper into our connection to that mind energy, which is intelligence, which is loving intelligence. So what does loving intelligence do when it's unleashed in this world and we are not in the way with our own personal thoughts of fear and grief? And all of those are good. But it's interesting to sometimes talk about, like, the Joanna Macy work in light of the 3 principles, because there's a connection and there's a way to connect those two logically. So my name is Amy. I'm in Santa Cruz. I'm with Amy Coaching and Education. I will check in after you all do. And Chantal.
Yeah, can I just ask that everyone just mutes themselves when they're not speaking, so that we can try and keep some of the background noise down for the recording? Yeah. Just a practical thing.
Okay, sorry. I didn't see the chat to mute everybody. Okay. So I'll mute myself, and then I'll just do a brief introduction to Chantal for the sake of the YouTube audience. And that is, she's a dear, dear friend. She's the author of Instant Motivation. She's working on a book on resiliency now. And she's worked with corporate at all levels in the UK and also with social services, done some really good research on the 3 principles in those arenas. And so this is Chantal. Do you want to check in then? Shall we just sort of check in with ourselves? Yeah, well, let's do that unless you disagree.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. As I've said before on previous webinars, I really enjoy being in this conversation, both from a personal perspective of just wanting to have a place to voice concerns, ask my own questions, reflect with other like-minded people, and also to be able to be of service to people as well, and to be able to share what I see that might be helpful for others. So for me, this feels like a very collegial conversation where we can come together. And recently, it's not even recently, I would just say that I'm this ongoing inquiry, and I kind of some days go more deeply into that inquiry, and other days I feel like I step back out of it, but really trying to get a sense of how and where I want to spend my time, in terms of my clients and in terms of the work that I'm doing. And the one thing that I'm really clear about is that I'm in the right place, as in the work that I do feels very relevant to what's going on and to what's needed. I do think that we are going to potentially be dealing with a mental health crisis, an epidemic. I think that feels inevitable. I would like to think it's not inevitable, and I think that, you know, the work that we do, Amy, and the work that lots of people in the helping professions do, would like to be able to stem that and slow that down or prevent that from happening. But I do feel like right now we need two things. We need we need truth on two levels. We need the truth in terms of the facts and what's really going on, and be able to face those facts and talk about them and look at them squarely. And then we need truth in terms of the spiritual truth of who we are. And so there's sort of two dimensions of truth that I'm really interested in, and they both seem equally as important, you know, because that, you know, understanding the truth about the climate emergency helps to give me a clear context, helps me to know where I should focus and what I need to think about and what I don't need to think about. And then being in touch with the spiritual truth allows me to navigate through that context that we're dealing with, and see how I can be most in service to myself, my family, my friends, people that I love, my clients, you know, and those around me, and how I can make a difference in my local environment, you know, where I live. So that's where I'm at right now. And I think conversations like this, and coming together like this, just feels relevant and important and very, very helpful. So I appreciate this, and appreciate you, Amy, for taking a stand for this as well. So yeah, that's me.
So we're just doing check-ins. If you don't have anything to check in with, you can just introduce yourself. But when people talk about the space that they're in, that's helpful to Chantal and I as facilitators in order to direct the conversation or bring up some ideas that might be helpful for us. So who would like to chime in now?
I can check in. My name is Peter Melton. I live a town called Watsonville, just south of Santa Cruz. Couple of things that Chantal just said were right in line with me. Something before we started recording, to say that she just knows that she can help, and that just ran right through me. I know there's a way that I can help as folks enter, or at any stage of the process that we find ourselves in, and it's just finding that avenue where I am now to be of service for folks in relation to just what she said after that, these multiple truths that we're daring to be with for myself, that I'm daring to be with for myself, is what do I believe is true about our predicament, our environmental, geopolitical, civilization-wide capitalistic challenge that we've stirred up for ourselves. What's true for me about that, or what's true scientifically, that what do I believe, but then what's true for me personally, but in regard to personally, what's true for me spiritually. So it feels like there might even be what feel like three different truths wanting to come together. And that I'm part of the Extinction Rebellion, which is part of how I connect with Amy, which one of the main demands is for the government to tell the truth. But what I've been getting clear for myself is I got to tell myself the truth. And I'm wanting to live from that truth more thoroughly, because I think it's real easy to put the blinders on and not want to own the real truth for myself. So thank you for holding this space, all of you, and happy to be here to connect and share.
Thank you so much, Peter. So we have Helena, and is it Vera, or it doesn't matter? Okay, you're on.
Hi everyone. Nice to see you again. I'm here in the north of Scotland in Findhorn, living in an eco-village, big eco-village. Yeah, I mean the theme is up everywhere around me. In many ways, I feel like I'm living in a very cushy corner here. Lots of nature, beautiful nature. At the moment, I feel almost like non-verbal. Don't have many words. Have a big internal focus at the moment, because I notice when I look out too much, I can like easily tip into depression, or like really depressed feelings, or very angry feelings, or then not sleep anymore, blah blah blah. However, like the most consistent answer for myself is the more I am really present and with what is around me just now, and open to that, then I'm open for appreciation, and then I feel like I'm at least nurturing what is me and what's around me. So you know, other people sit in sanctuaries for that, and for me it feels like I'm just trying to do that as much as I can. It's my response right now, as well as like making choices in my shopping. I've not joined Extinction Rebellion yet. There's like a group quite close that are active, but I haven't. Don't know. I'm taking it day by day. It feels like my actions are rather minute, but that's also for me where the power sits. You know, like when I'm out on the bay collecting rubbish, I keep coming back to that little example because that for me it does it so much. And I come back with a handful, then I can say, well, what's a handful in comparison to what we're producing every day? Or like that piece of rubbish isn't going to end up in a fish belly right now. And that turns like my whole attitude into something that is empowering and can ripple. I wish I could do more, and maybe tomorrow I will, or maybe, yeah. But that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Yay for where you're at. And Helena, is it Helena? Oh, here, I can maybe unmute you, Mike. There you go. Cool.
Hello. It's Helena.
Helena.
Helena, yes. I'm a friend of Jenny and Dave's, so I know a little bit about the 3 principles. And I recently went to the Extinction Rebellion protest in London, which was easy to kind of get involved with, being kind of passionate about environmental issues and the natural world. But I guess I kind of went along a little bit naive, maybe about the extent of the kind of crisis. I probably might get emotional, by the way. So sorry, a little bit embarrassing to do on camera, but so yeah, so it's been getting involved with Extinction Rebellion has felt amazing, to be sort of a part of doing something productive that feels like it's having an impact. And at the same time, it's been the last sort of week or 2 has been a bit of an education for me about the extent of the situation that we're kind of facing. And I also, I don't know if it was a mistake, but read Deep Adaptation, which has slightly destabilized me over the last week. So yeah, kind of going in and out of feelings of kind of grief, confusion, sort of feeling angry, fearful, and then having moments where I also feel hopeful that things are happening. I'm trying to just kind of get a gauge on how serious things are, and wanting to find ways of processing how I'm feeling around it that isn't sort of spiritually bypassing. I want to sort of make sure that I'm being I am really facing up to what's happening, but at the same time not tipping into something that's unhealthy, and not going to be contributing towards the amazing things that do feel like they're actually kind of shifting, and this kind of feeling that there is a kind of consciousness that's waking up, and that feels really, at the same time as feeling overwhelmed by sort of realizing the extent of things happening. I also feel very kind of deeply moved seeing the kind of human response to that, and things like this that are kind of popping up, and so it feels really nice to be connecting around these issues. I think that's all I've got to say for now.
Thank you. That was, yeah. Well, you know, you're in the right place. In terms of, we have all been through, you know, it's almost like there are stages of accepting the information, maybe trying to argue it a bit and see if there are holes in the science that's presented. Is there any? And the context for me has been like, you know, there's two possibilities. We're either heading for the iceberg, or we've hit it and we're not quite sure where we are. But either way, it's good to know, right? And so our activities would be quite different than if the ship were just cruising along, right? And I, in the context of this webinar, for me anyway, like the fact that we may not actually make it, and we may be facing, you know, we just saw, Peter and I just saw Dar Jamal speak, and I mean, it's hard to even say it, but Dar at one point said to someone who questioned him, like, he's the author of The End of Ice. Okay, so he's a journalist, and he's been in the Arctic studying the ice and reporting and etc. At one point he said, you know, billions of people will die. Like, he's pretty sure, you know? And yet when he was presenting the science, I thought, well, and it's funny that we haven't died yet, you know, like what's holding this together right now? Because we probably should have started really happening 10 years ago, you know, I don't know, but it's amazing that we're still sort of operating the way we are. But the context of this webinar is, you know, like, it's possible that this is what's happening now. And so that's really a lot, you know, and I'll just share a little story of mine, and then it might be good to go into the principles, or maybe someone else has something to say. But, you know, the activism can certainly become, it's both for me a wonderful way of being in community with others, and there's something really comforting about that. You know, I think Peter probably feels the same way, that we've developed a community here in Extinction Rebellion that involves, you know, we're going on a seed hike, and we're going to gather seeds and throw them out, you know, to just try, you know, to plant some trees and see what we can do, right? But there's so much community and connection that is so nourishing. And, you know, it just feels like we just do our best, you know, like that's all we can do. And it can be a little bit of feeling like a distraction from the other feelings that are there sometimes. Like, we're going to get busy, and we'll be so busy that we can't really think about what's happening. And I remember like maybe 2 weeks ago, I went for a walk in the Pogonip, which is, I call it my church. It's an open space here. And I really just started to cry, you know, and you know, there's there's something about that, what Joanna Macy calls allowing the grief, and just allowing it to be there, that is better than the denial piece, which is the grief is there. It's obviously there, but then we're like, no, I just can't feel that because that will hurt me. That will be too painful and I won't survive it. But then when we allow it, what happens is that layer of thought falls away. And then so the less thought we're having, the better, right? Because we're going for a quiet mind. So the quiet mind is always there. It's just that there's thoughts and emotions on top of it. So when we drop the thought that I can't feel the grief, we come down into the present some more. And when we just feel the grief, then that's even more presence because this is what is. The grief is just the feeling in our bodies and our hearts, right? And that's more into the present, more into the now. And as I let myself just grieve walking through the woods, coming into the present helped me find an insight, which was, like, and life is still really beautiful. Like I felt like, a cancer patient who gets a terminal diagnosis. Like there's all this, I don't want to, this total freak out, all these emotions. And then it sort of settled down into like, and that might be what's real and true. And I'm walking in these woods and all these trees are still alive, and on life and love, that energy of life itself it's not going to go anywhere. That energy can't, all species could collapse except for 3, right? And still mind energy, for those of you who are familiar with the principles, is untouched. It's eternal. It's not going anywhere. There are other planets and other stars, and it's tough when you have children to think about, for me, like the future, and we'll just do our best. And that's been the toughest, to be personally honest, like that is very hard. I don't know what my children's futures will be. I don't know how to guide them exactly right now. I can only trust their wisdom, and I'm letting them have the info just in bits, but they have a sense, and I'm hoping that their wisdom will come forth with that. So anyway, I've been blabbing on and on, but any thoughts about, let's open it up. And if anyone wants to hear more about the principles, we can talk about that, or any, like, that sounds really stupid, Amy.
I would like to hear a little bit more about the principles and how you see them tying into where we stand.
Chantal, do you feel inspired, or do you want me to sail forth, or? Okay, you're muted, honey.
No, sorry. No, I mean, carry on if you're feeling it, and I can just come in as and when.
Okay. Well, so this will just be a reflection together, because I haven't actually sat down to spend a whole lot of time thinking about the principles and the climate crisis deeply. So let's see what happens, right? So this mind energy that I just spoke of, we're using this word mind with a capital M, is the intelligence of life. It's the intelligence in trees. It's the intelligence in the solar system. It's the intelligence in the galaxy. It's the intelligence in the universe. It's the intelligence in us and in our bodies and in all being. And this is something that's formless. It exists within form, but it is formless, and therefore, via its formless nature, cannot be damaged. So when people talk about death, for example, and the personality goes, the body goes, and yet there's an energy in us that doesn't go. I have no idea what that experience is, but the energy doesn't go. It always is. And it doesn't have there's no sense of location here, there, or time. And so this is what we actually are. We are this mind energy in form. And the only way that we can experience life in form is because we have consciousness. And consciousness is our capacity to have sensory experience. So that means that, you know, we live and we experience, we have awareness. Sydney Banks used to say, consciousness is it's just awareness. It's not complicated. Like, Peter, you don't even have to take notes because you actually know. You know this. It's so simple. It's like the ABCs, right? And just those three, not even the rest of them, right? Just the A and the B and the C. And so we have this gift of consciousness when we're born. We're suddenly conscious of form. We're conscious of sight, smell, taste, touch, you know, all the sensations, the coldness, the warmth, etc. And then the third principle. So consciousness is the second principle, just in the order that I'm going in. There's no particular order. And thought is our capacity to create ideas and to create a shape, a form from this intelligence. So what that means is, like a thought, it becomes like sort of a discrete piece of energy, a discrete form. And when we say thought, this can be, don't think about it too much because it's very simple. Our definition for thought is more simple than any other definition I have ever heard. It's more universal, it's more basic. And it's basically that we constantly live in a world of thought. Thought is the sort of water in which we swim. And every minute of the day, we're creating a new thought form, or maybe we're repeating a thought form over and over again, but we're always producing some kind of thought. And that thought, and this is why you change your feelings as you go through life or through a day at an Extinction Rebellion protest, let's say, because one minute you're thinking, or I'll be thinking about the future and what might be coming down the pike, or even thinking about what's happening already in the Bahamas, or, you know, in Louisiana, or in the Micronesian islands, or in India, where things are happening already in terms of crisis, or let's say extreme crisis. And all of that, I mean, as real as all those things sort of are in what we would call regular reality, right? They actually we don't experience the future without thought. And there is no future, actually. There is no future right now, but for our thinking about it, right? There is actually no future that exists. There's no past that exists, but for our thinking about it. So we actually create the future and the past as ideas. And then we live in them. So that's helpful in terms of the crisis, because we can check ourselves when we're going way out there. When Dar Jamal says billions of people will die, we can start to imagine what that would look like. And that might be good in a practical sense, because maybe we want to try to prevent that from happening. Maybe we can still pull this off. We don't know. My hope comes from we don't know. And if we wake up and wake up and wake up to the facts, as Chantal said, and to our inner wisdom about what to do, to me, that's the formula for success. That's the only formula I know of that will work. And it's great because it's very simple. Like it doesn't involve a lot of steps. It's just, these are the facts, come into the present. So when your mind is not in the future and in the past, I'm not saying it's not okay to think about those things. It's just notice when it's creating a lot of distress for you. And that's when you want to check yourself. Okay, wait a second. Check myself. I can be in distress and let go of the thoughts that are creating that distress. And then what happens is I'm just left with the feeling of distress. And then that starts to dissolve because I am no longer generating the thoughts that created that feeling. So that's the other piece, is that our thoughts are always creating every thought has a sort of a color or a flavor, like a food coloring in water. Either it's blue or it's red or it's anger or it's calm or it's love and we just keep putting thoughts into the water of our minds. So that's really helpful to know, because we think, and this is a doozy, okay, because I struggle with this one, and I'm just going to be honest, the climate crisis is not causing our grief and despair. It's our thoughts about the climate crisis. Now, these thoughts are completely understandable. And actually, I would be concerned if someone didn't have a few thoughts, right? Just as a wake up, like, hello. I mean, if someone dies, there's a natural response. But this is the radical nature of those principles, which is to say that even when something catastrophic is happening, people were in concentration camps in Germany, and there were some people who were able to maintain some sense of well-being. Why? Because of their thoughts. And that's possible now. To be in the face of complete global planetary catastrophe, to be looking at that and knowing that, and also, knowing also that deeply, 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 everything is also okay and always will be okay, from a formless perspective, from the fact of who we truly are. And that's the depth of, spiritual wisdom that we all have access to. We might not be we might not be living in that wisdom all the time, but we have access to it via coming into the present and becoming still within our minds. And I kiss all of your feet, because to come to be looking at the crisis, to not be looking away at this time, to me, is heroic. And then how beautiful to be able to support each other on this webinar, and Extinction Rebellion, empathy tents, and all that. That's a beautiful part of Extinction Rebellion, especially in the UK, which has it much more developed. But actually want to tell you guys, I'm in touch now with UK International Regenerative Culture, and I'm gathering a list of principals, teachers, and others who are willing to support activists around the world doing Extinction Rebellion work in their group settings, conflict resolution, mediation, and also personal coaching and support. There's an iPhone person who raised a hand. Oh, that's you. Okay, I'm going to unmute you, or you unmute yourself. Yeah, can you?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was really wanting to stay on the spiritual point.
Oops.
The spiritual point that you were at about knowing ourselves. Me talking, Peter? Do you hear me?
Yeah, you just cut out for a second. I think it's okay now.
Okay. So I was wanting to stay with the spiritual place that you had taken us to, and not run away from there, because for me, I think that's the key of being at peace as I live through this. And it really tied in. Thank you for the description of the principles, because it is in fact our thoughts about things and the meaning we give things that are determining so much of who we think we are and what we think we're going through. And I was interested to tie in this, one of the other gals mentioned spiritual bypass, and where spiritual bypass crisscrosses with spiritual knowing. As when you just moved that, Amy, it was this beautiful starburst of the sun coming through the window just as we were discussing the knowingness of our spiritual light being selves.
I know. That's why I sit here.
So yeah, I'd like to open the.
Can you rephrase? Can you just state the question again?
Yeah. So I'm inviting us to explore what is spiritual bypass and what's not, amidst what you just said, that we are in fact this cosmic unfolding of awareness and consciousness, and that is manifested as these beings that we are. And then we've got this individuated this trick of individuation that is leading to these thoughts, that the difference between, I guess, knowing myself as infinite loving consciousness and not, yeah, and where does that connect with spiritual bypass or not?
You know, for me, spiritual bypass is not trusting that we are who we really are. So there's a bypass. And I can speak more to that, but I'm wondering if Chantal, does this resonate with you at all?
Well, I want to say that just sparked something in me, is that it's not a spirit, that we've got it flipped around, that we are spirit and we've bypassed to think that we're individuated Peters and Pauls and Marys, and that the bypass is really a material bypass that we've been living our whole lives, instead of the spirit, well, not instead of, but in relation to the spiritual, cosmic, infinite love reality that is.
Yeah, and go ahead, yeah, Helena.
I was just going to say, when I mentioned it originally, I guess my understanding of spiritually bypassing, and maybe in the context of the climate crisis, would be so sort of relating spiritual teachings that are true on one level, but maybe not on a relative level. So just to sort of say that everything is fine, everything is, and on one level that is true, and on another level it isn't true, and sort of being able to hold all the different levels and the complexity of that, and not what's the word, sort of mistype, to know those levels in their right place, and not to that's my understanding. When sometimes I can be put off because if it's, I think what I really appreciated when I listened to the second video that you guys did, and I was listening to you, Amy, speaking about what you really trusted about people who were talking about the crisis, was people who had actually really honestly faced the facts and what was going on. And then they were kind of saying, okay, and how can I, then applying maybe more spiritual teachings to it. But there was that kind of honesty and authenticity and our human experience to what's actually happening. So you're not just, because we are human as well as spirit. I think we're such multi-dimensional beings, aren't we? So we experience things on so many different. So I've got a dog on my lap, it keeps moving if I'm bobbing around. So I don't know if I said that clearly, but so that's what I meant by spiritually bypassing would be it not being somehow talking about the spirit side not being in balance with the relative side of what's happening, and for me feeling that there needs to be a balance between all of those things and levels. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because I mean, when I hear that spiritual bypass, to me, you know, I'm aligned with you, in that. Well, my sense of it is that it's when we use it's. I don't even know if this is going to make sense, but it's like we're using the spiritual truth of just being pure consciousness as a almost as an excuse for not doing anything. But I don't think, but I think it's very innocent. I don't think it's an intentional thing.
No.
I think it's very innocent, but it feels like it can feel like a dichotomy. Well, if we're just pure energy, really this is just a cosmic hallucination, then to do, just be. So I think that is part of for me, that is part of the search, or the challenge, or the inquiry, is holding both the very physical, tangible, relative, as you say, reality of that this planet may exist in some form or another in 50 years, 40 years, 100 years, but will we still be able to, will we be able to inhabit it? And if that matters to us, it matters to me, then I want to do everything I can. If there is any possibility of massively slowing that down or turning it around, yeah, I'm all in, tell me what to do, kind of thing. But then there's that other part of me that's also wants to be steeped in and living from the truth of who we are, and it's how those worlds or dimensions coexist. And I don't want to use the spirit, I would never want to be using the spiritual nature of who we are as a way to put my head in the sand, or I think that it's about how one informs the other, and making sure that that's aligned in the right way. And I feel like that's probably a struggle that lots of people are having or will have. So I just wanted to share that to bring some additional clarity to the conversation.
And I think the truth is that the crisis asks so much of us, it's asking so much of us, in terms of changing our jobs perhaps, or just not going about our business. Where are we getting our income from, and who are we supporting, and who are we, even as a principles practitioner, you may be doing corporate consulting that, is quite lucrative. And then you have to think about, is this something I mean, it will change everything. And it's also, I think there's a personal fear of just looking. And that's what I mean by when there's a fear of just looking, there's a lack of trust in oneself that there's a capacity to handle the truth. And I understand that, because this particular truth in the relative world, which is true, is huge. Like it's it's hard for me to judge people who are spiritually bypassing. I don't think it's a good place to stay, but I understand the impulse, because people are not fully trusting that actually that they have this deeper wisdom, that if they let go of everything that they thought they would be doing in their lives, I already have done that. I can't see the future very far ahead anymore for my children or for my family or for anyone. That there still will be direction and guidance, if that makes sense. And so I think it's spiritual bypass to me is about fear, ultimately. And I was talking to a friend of mine. I've just so enjoyed connecting with colleagues again, because I've been so busy in the activism, and now I'm like, I want to go back and start connecting these worlds together. And we were talking about activists and non-activists. And so there's a beautiful example in India of Ramana Maharshi, who sat at the base of, I can't pronounce this very well, Aranachala, the mountain. Aranachala. Do you know it?
Arunachala, I think.
Arunachala. What? Is that right?
Yeah. Arunachala.
Arunachala, this beautiful mountain he loved. It was his spiritual home and his base and his everything. And in the meantime, India's in chaos, right, with the British and all this. But for him, this was his role, and he wasn't in denial about what was happening, right? but he didn't see his role being going out and doing much of anything except speaking to people who came to his ashram. Gandhi, on the other hand, was all over the place. And people would ask him, Ramana, about Gandhi. What about him? He's very active in the world. He's out there. He's trying to change things. And Ramana would say, he said it several times, he is in his spirit. He is in spirit. I have no questions about Gandhi. So, and how powerful Gandhi was to have given us this theory of nonviolence that is now alive in Extinction Rebellion across the world. You know, whether or not we think whatever happened in India was terribly successful, or the conflict with Pakistan, I mean, there's a river of truth that we have access to with Gandhi's nonviolence. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, so I think people often are afraid if I look at the truth, I'll have to be like an Amy or like someone. And I'm unique this way. I'm like the Energizer Bunny over here. But it could be like Vera, like right now I'm just picking up pieces of plastic on the beach. And those are both so, like, who knows where the value is or how much value is in either action? We don't know. As long as it's coming from, this is really what makes sense for me. Vera, how are you doing? Oops, you're muted.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Don't you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it really fascinating, this conversation, because I find like that staying really, really present. Open something that is deeply political, can be deeply political, although each action might just be so minute. But like, I see it here in our community, there's various heated debates, and all those debates have like a tendency to go into separation. People being fed up with each other, being frustrated with each other, getting dogmatic. And I find it sometimes so hard not to get involved in that kind of energy, in that kind of stream. So, and I feel like it's a success not to go in and leave kindness behind. And I really, really do believe that is huge. It's a big thing we can do, because we create like a micro energy field of connection and belonging and closeness, which I live by. And it gets like, as we get more and more fragmented and eating up and getting lost in all the problems, and I feel that's what you've been saying, Amy. Everybody in their way, I think. It's just that the shadow side is so stark. Like, when do we really need to kick into action and be out there? And when is it actually better to kind of hold my horses and not give into that energy that wants to dissipate?
And that's such a personal journey for you, and your observations and your insights, given who Vera is. And interestingly, I'm in this situation where, being an activist, there's a lot of ideas, there's dogma, there's things that come up, and so I've been in the world of throwing myself into the bumper car arena, right? And And it's okay. Like, it's okay, because what happens is I'll get upset and then I come out and I come back, and it just all settles down, and then I can come back to working with other activists with, oh, I think I wasn't understanding you, or let's figure out why you feel this way, or what are your real fears and so I'm in a very rough and tumble environment with activism. I'm involved in several groups right now. 3 major groups, 2 on climate, 1 on homelessness, and I'm only able to stay sane. Like, and I'm not questioning my involvement because it seems to be happening, but the sanity for me is coming back to, there's I don't know how to describe it. I just let everything go. Like, it's okay. This could all fall apart. I might not get my way. Just none of this may work. And then I get back into just like, and I'm still here. And the depth of that, it's one thing to say I'm still here, but there's a depth in being here that, we all have a moment of, like, we have these moments of where we feel the depth of what it means to be here, and the gratitude and the beauty that we see, all around us. And suddenly I notice my pets, and I'm notice them in a way where I'm connecting with them, right? Whereas they're just part of the furniture sometimes. Does that make sense? I think we can actually all unmute, because as long as you don't have a lot of noises going on, it's okay. But if there's noises, then yeah. So any other thoughts?
I was just thinking earlier today, one thing that kind of gives me a bit of hope, I guess, in this situation is I work as an acupuncturist. So I'm quite often, I guess, I'm working at a kind of deeper energetic level that is quite often something that is hard to quantify and measure in science. And so much of the data around the climate crisis it's all about this kind of very measurable and quantifiable stuff that's being reported, that we're kind of heading towards this real catastrophe, which I don't doubt is true. And but at the same time, I'm kind of wondering about the things that are not being measured and not being quantified and not necessarily seen, and these kind of huge changes that are happening in consciousness, partly because of the crisis and what that's bringing up. And that's not something that's going to get reported in a scientific paper that we necessarily read, but I think is undoubtedly interlinked with physical matter and what's happening on a physical level with the planet and with ourselves and with. So yeah, I guess it gives me hope to think that there's something on another level that's happening alongside what the science is showing us, and that makes me feel like you can't fully predict exactly what's going to happen. And the other thing that comes to mind as I say that is when I was reading, actually I wasn't reading, I was watching an interview with somebody called, what's her name? She'd had a near-death experience and she's quite fit. Anita Morjani, don't know if anyone's heard of her.
Yeah.
And that sort of amazing story of when basically her whole body was riddled with cancer and she was pretty much going to die within, I don't know what the doctors said, but I think it was in a few weeks. And then she had this very profound near-death experience where she'd kind of touched on her true nature and oneness, and kind of, I think her story, what she said was that she'd learned to really love herself, and the profound kind of healing effect that had on a very physiological level, not just on a spirit level, but that kind of interconnection between physical matter and this other kind of realm. And I think I hold that alongside knowing what's happening at a physical level, just that there's things that aren't measurable and unreported, and I think it's that we shouldn't forget the impact of connecting like this and connecting in our relationships and processing our emotions, because I think that when we're doing all this kind of work on ourselves and actually I think when facing something which feels so huge and facing that huge amount of kind of grief that something like this brings up, I think on the other side of that, the other sort of flip side of grief is a real profound love, because it sort of, the grief is so intense because we love sort of our planet, and I think that in itself is really powerful. And so I kind of have hope in that experience, even though it's alongside a lot of painful feelings. I think that I'm sorry, I'm so emotional. I should have probably waited a week or two to join before.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that something in there really resonated, Helena. Thank you. That there's the untold part about what the earth is doing. That's this mystery zone of magic is just the word that just came up. But then, just like you were saying with your work and so much of our human work, there's so much magic in the human story, in the human heart, in our love and our consciousness. And so I'm imagining this in-between zone of the untangible, right? That is the earth doing its thing, and the cosmic magic and the human magic that lives in between. And what that just was bringing me to is this feeling of presence, that in the moment, knowing that you're mad, knowing that I'm magic, and knowing that the whole cosmos is magic, is this place of presence I can be in, that as I'm coming to jot down, it's this presence that equals hope, that this remembering, this present moment remembering that I am the magic of the universe, cleverly disguised as Peter, that is what hope is for me, not hope in some tangible outcome, although there's a desire for that, but that when I go to the future, I'm away from the present, and the present is where this magic blend is, and I connected to that through what you said. So thank you.
That's I think, I guess I can say it in this context, but that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I must have some sense of hope. And I think it has to do with the mystery of spirit interacting with, like all the mystics say, we are one. It's one. And what happens when human beings wake up to their oneness? And we are so powerful, right, as physical creatures in this world. We don't know what happens when we start to wake up. And I think this kind of work is so important because that we could go in two directions, right? Some people will go into panic, and people are predicting violence, and we don't know. Some people also say how beautifully people respond to crises, and how connected, and how we actually create new societies on the ground in our neighborhoods. When there's a hurricane, people suddenly are out barbecuing and sharing all their meat because they can't refrigerate it, so they have these potlucks, and they figure out how to be together, and we're missing that so much. So I think about the opportunity for community. I have never had so much community in my life as I do now. I mean, every weekend there's like 3 things happening that are beautiful things with beautiful people, and I can't even do them all because I have to do laundry sometimes. So, and Vera, you live at Findhorn, yeah? And I've been reading about Eileen Caddy. And she's one of the founders of Findhorn, yeah? So this is something interesting because I don't know what you know, but I'd love to hear a little bit from you, because Eileen Caddy and her partner I mean, I don't know if it was Eileen. There were three people I know who founded Finhorn, but one of them, maybe it was Eileen, would think and resonate with the earth and the plants so deeply that Finhorn, which is a very barren, rocky environment, they would plant things and just go with the intuition she had, and it would be like the biggest squash you've ever seen in this very barren, unfertile. So could you, I'm talking about it and I feel self-conscious because you're there. And I would love to hear if you know, because that's to me the power of spirit.
The place was founded by these three people. One of which, maybe to start, is they had a very, very profound, dedicated spiritual education. And that's spiritual, not religious, but through about a decade before they then came here. So it's a very long story, but essentially because they were totally committed to this. Like one heard guidance, that was Eileen Caddy, and then Dorothy McLean was tuning into the natural world, the spirit, like if you have like a cauliflower, for example, you know, like that the cauliflower grows as a cauliflower here and in France and in America and in Russia as a cauliflower. There's like a spiritual blueprint behind it. And she basically perceived that essence or angel or whatever you want to call it of the plants, and got guidance from that, and by basically putting whatever the guidance was into action, they kind of grounded it, and the result was that those miracles started to happen, which drew camera teams and which then grew this.
Vera, can you move the computer a little closer? Because we can hear you, but it's a bit faint, and it'd be good to have the speaker closer to you. Yeah.
So, is it better?
I think so.
Yeah, so basically this place here is founded on inner listening and on communicating with nature and putting like listening to the God within, communicating with nature, with the spirit of nature, and putting it into action. Love in action. So we have three principles here too, you know, and how much people do with it is entirely up to them. It's a very kind of say loose community. There's lots of invitation, but there's no, like, you get fired, you know, if you're not doing it. But yeah, it comes down to the same principles. It's in three principles, slightly different in expression, but I would say underneath is like there's a divine oneness or energy field that if we tune into that and open to that and listen to it, then we will respond to whatever we find in the moment in a better way than we run away with our thinking. And there I would say they totally overlap.
And it's, I mean, that to me is like, it's just the proof of the pudding, because my understanding is the vegetables grew amazingly beautifully well. And there was no reason to think they would in that environment. And yet, because Eileen Caddy was tuning into this intelligence, she was affecting the natural world this
Well,
way.
the thing is, I think it gets proved now lots and lots in schools as well, that if you plant sunflower seeds and talk to them, kids, like if they talk to their sunflower seeds, they grow better than the sunflower seeds that get watered but not talked to. So there is definitely a factor X that is being discovered all over the show. like everywhere. And that's why I think, you know, when you walk through the, as you said, when you walk through the woods and think about like the enormity of the task and not connect with nature, an opportunity is lost for just that. And that's where like this deeply personal thing also becomes political. Because if it is true that there's only a one, that there's ultimately only one, then we are connected with all the beings, not just human beings, but animal beings and forest beings and the mycelium. And if we connect with it in appreciation and love, it has a chance to respond.
So, how beautiful to think, how beautiful to think that, because what this crisis is doing for a lot of people is reigniting our gratitude and our sense of like, wow, we're going to lose stuff because we haven't been paying attention to our interconnectedness. And we're going to lose so much. We already have lost so much because of that, really. And so we can go out and march and do all, not even march. We don't like to march. We like to disrupt. But we can go out and disrupt and we can be political, and that's great. But how amazing to think that in the shift of attention, there may be an effect on the natural world just in the shift of our consciousness, that may be even helping. You know, one of the things that feels so good is in XR right now is we're doing this hike on Sunday to gather seeds, and then we're going to plant them. Trees around town, black walnuts, which are natural to here. And I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know anything about planting trees, but we're going to do it. And it just to go on that walk and to plant it. And I know exactly where I want to plant a tree of my own. And you know, to love it and to see, you know, hopefully it won't die, but you know, like there's just, I think what I'm trying to say is there's some kind of profound hope in that realization of our interconnection and living from that, and the love that we can share or show to nature now, that in itself, without moving our bodies at all to do anything, might be helpful. Yeah. Wow, you know, like that's
I really believe on that. And yeah. Like, I'm not sure if it's on YouTube, but there's a chap here, he lives here, who is the founder of Trees for Life. And he is reforesting the Caledonian forest up, you know, 80 miles from here, 100 miles from here. And he's done that up in the hills, you know, they are completely barren. There's like not a tree in sight because there's overgrazing. And he started fencing areas off and then just planting seedlings. But they go to these trees, they go visit them, they kind of smile at them, and then they do what they do. But he said he shows like how fast they have grown in response to the human attention, in comparison to other trees. It's really fascinating.
Wow.
You know, this stuff. Yeah, there's evidence everywhere that it works. The Japanese guy Masaru Emoto,
yeah,
who's done water testing.
The water, yeah.
Same thing.
Well,
living made underneath, and that I feel like if life gets really bad, we still got that. We can still connect up with our divinity, which is exactly what I think Sid Banks is saying. You know, like this invitation to touch through into that layer where oneness happens and where there's miracles. You know, Anita Mojani, those spontaneous remissions. There is a miracle there, and I mean, I want to think that sometimes I think like if I zoom far enough out, God or whoever it is, that oneness being must be extremely excited about what's going on here, because it seems like really consciousness is bursting out, you know, helped along by our political leaders.
Yes.
How impossible.
Oh, helped along. I was thinking, who are you talking about? But you mean the other kind of help.
They're just
Yes, no.
they're just pushing us out.
No, I think that's so right on. That I enjoy having conversations with God, if you will, or consciousness, and it's like, what's going on here from the infinite spirit perspective, right? And it hits right what you were just saying. Look at what we're doing. Look at what's happening in this evolution of life, and not just the evolution of humanity or the evolution of me personally, but the evolution of our species and the evolution of the earth. You know, are we the earth evolving? Is that really what's going on here? And as part of the earth evolution and the cosmic evolution and the Homo sapien evolution, that look what we're remembering right now. And that when I tap into that cosmic place, it says, wow, you know, when there's no time, and when we know that there's no death, right? As infinite energy would know, in my opinion, it's a major wow going on for infinite consciousness, saying, look what's unfolding. They're remembering to the degree that they remember in these moments. But this crisis, if you will, is creating a spiritual urgency, a sense of urgency to remember who we are. And when I dare to try to feel the best I can feel about what's happening, that's where it goes to that remembering my infinite self that's saying, wow. And what a magic time to be alive, if you will, to connect to the magic that is happening with every moment. The magic breathes me, and every moment that I can say, wow, that the cosmic me is chuckling and is completely in tune with what's happening.
So you were talking about remembering, and I want to encourage something else, which it's not contrary to what you're saying. It's just using a word play, which is the idea of forgetting. And I was talking to one of our beautiful XR friends here in Santa Cruz, who's a dynamo woman. And at one point I said, you know, I think every now and then it's good to forget. It's just good to forget about the climate crisis. It's good to forget about extinction. It's good to forget about capitalism. It's just good to forget. And really, the word forget is perhaps not correct, right, in this case. But she said, well, no, it's good to hold them both. You need to hold both the grief and so people have a lot of ideas, but when it comes down to the principles, it gets very simple. Like forgetting is just clearing the mind. That's all it is. It's not an act, actually, like I won't ever remember, I won't ever think of these important things again, because obviously we will. Most of us are having a hard time clearing our minds. But the importance and the value of really not, like we can use a spiritual technique also to try to think our way into a better place, you know, with ideas of the mystical, but we don't actually, it's fine to do that if it's helpful, but we don't have to, because in the quieting of the mind, without words, without thoughts, without, like, let's say traditional thoughts or typical thoughts, it's all there already. It's like there's nothing you have to do to find that space, and there's no particular practice or set of magical words. And there's a way we can sometimes pursue it, like, okay, I'm going to pursue that magical space because I've heard about it, I experienced it, and here are the ideas. But actually, you know, the nice thing about Sydney Banks was he didn't come from a tradition. And he had no practices. And there was, I think, a real reason for that, which is that space is always, always there and always who we are. So it's, Sid used to say it's one thought away, meaning like subtract thought, subtract. And that's not always easy to do, but going for, a practice might be that helps you to quiet, might be going for a walk in the woods, or even just stopping all the activity and maybe sitting in the storm of thoughts and just not giving energy to that, to the thoughts that are either about the crisis or about the future, or even the thoughts that are about spirituality, even deeper than that, into that simple beingness. So my friend, she said, well, and then the other day she said, no, you got to hold them both. And then she went dancing, and she was watching all the people dancing at this place. And she was so pissed because she was like, they shouldn't be dancing because the world is ending, and look at them. They're all in some kind of a bypass. They're all in denial. And she was frustrated, like we do get sometimes, and which is normal. And then she said, and then I realized if I can't have fun, I'm in trouble, And so she said, and then I was like, I need to forget. I'm going to forget for the rest of the night and just dance. And, there's so much value in that, because that's when we get refreshed. That's when we get rejuvenated. That's when a new idea comes forward that might change the course of our lives in the right direction, for lack of a better phrase. And we're getting to the end of the time. So I wanted to just put out a call. And there's a reason why I mentioned this list that I'm developing, because I want it to be active. And so that means, like at Findhorn, maybe they have a process for handling some of the conflicts you're speaking of, but because it is an ecological community with the spiritual perspective, there may be people on this list who are willing to do some pro bono consulting. And I also want to put out a call about this particular webinar series to share it, because we do put some energy into getting it out there, and we really there's so much need, and I think it's just a matter of connecting, the need to what's being offered. And so please do share it from Facebook, or share it by word of mouth, or maybe write on the Facebook page some words that would encourage people to join on, because tell your friends, that kind of thing. We're putting energy into it to be helpful and to support people going out into the world with a refreshed, renewed sense of, their own incredible power. So
I'll put it out.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, it's last Friday of every month. And I think it's all right now on the Facebook. My website is outdated, but I'm going to be updating it this coming week. And then it'll be on my website too, for people if they want to just grab the Zoom link. It'll be the same Zoom link now. So any last thoughts as we say goodbye, or are we all okay?
Gratitude for all of you.
Yeah. I just, Sid used to say it's not how many, but who. And so I feel that way today. I felt that way probably on all the calls, but so.
Yeah, nice to have your little doggie in the background there too.
Yeah, she's in her being.
There's your...
Mine's over there.
Actually, Vera, you might recognise this dog, because we were at the retreat in the Lake Districts. This is Brenton's little dog, Molly, who I'm dog sitting for.
Oh, were you guys at Kimberly's retreat? Was that
we were both at a retreat.
At Dickens retreat.
Dickens retreat. Okay. Okay, guys.
So was Molly.
Molly, this is Coco.
Oh, hello, Coco.
Okay. Who is it?
Ria.
Ria. Cool. We're going to see Ria.
Delightful. Very
Oh,
delightful
that's
to
Ria.
spend my morning with you all.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ciao. I'm going to sign off now.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Lots of love.
Love, love, love.
See you next month.